Larry Hogan, Governor, I know you got a lot going on. Appreciate it very much. You're taking the time to join us.
Sure.
What will be the impact, first of all, of the president's emergency declaration on Maryland's response to the coronavirus?
Well, first of all, we declared a state of emergency more than a week ago, and we were very pleased to see that the president took those actions today. And I think that many of the things that he laid out are going to be helpful to those of us in the states. I can tell you that we took similar kinds of steps at the state level, but it really is going to take help from the federal government, and all of the things that he talked about are things that I think are going to be helpful. As chairman of the National Governors Association, we've been in contact constantly, all of the governors across the country, with the leaders of the federal government, cabinet secretaries, two meetings in the past week or so in the Situation Room, and with almost nearly all of the governors in America. And we've been talking about some of the things that we needed. And I was very pleased at some of the steps that he took today, and glad that it happened. I know you're working on specific new emergency legislation to help people in Maryland facing unemployment or other disruption due to this virus. Specifically, what will the legislation do? Yeah. Well, so we took unprecedented action yesterday, where we closed all schools throughout Maryland. We activated the National Guard, and we put this social distancing action forward on limiting any kind of gatherings of more than 250 people or more, along with 7 or 8 other major executive actions I took under the state of emergency. We've been ramping up this response, and it really, many of these things that steps we've taken, now other states are starting to do some of these things in various places. We're sharing all of those best practices between the governors and among the governors. But this is such a rapidly escalating crisis, Wolf, that, as you know, as you're covering this, it's changing not on a daily, but on an hourly, almost minute-by-minute basis. And each of us, as governors, are trying to stay on top of it, and we're working together as best we can with our federal partners. I also I've called emergency meetings of our cabinet, and we've got a coronavirus emergency response team with some of the smartest health professionals in the world, from places like Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland Medical System, epidemiologists who are advising us on the decisions. And we've called an emergency meeting with all of our local jurisdictions and counties and cities across the state to try to talk with them about coordinating the response. But we are in a state of emergency. We raised our level to the highest level. We've activated our Maryland Emergency Management Agency. We're moving in the National Guard. Governor, hold on for a moment. Our Manu Raju is getting some breaking news up on Capitol Hill, and I want you, Governor, to respond. Manu, what are you learning?
Yeah, there's a deal now between Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, and the Trump administration after a major deal to deal with how to deal with the impact of the coronavirus outbreak throughout this country. This was significant deal that has been reached came after days of negotiations between the Speaker and the Treasury Secretary. They spoke about 13 times today. They spoke 8 times last night. And what this does is it would ensure that every person who wants to get a test could get a free test. They wouldn't have to pay for that. Also, it outlines a number of other measures, according to the letter that the Speaker just sent to our members detailing this measure. It includes 2 weeks of paid emergency leave for displaced workers. Also, it would ensure provide more funding for food stamps and other food assistance programs, particularly for children who may be relying on schools to provide assistance. Now, under this program, they would those individual students, particularly low-income students, could have access to food and school lunch programs that they would not get because of schools being closed. Also, it would increase funding from the federal government to the states for Medicaid programs to ensure that folks who are eligible for the Medicaid program can ensure the care through that program. Now, we are still waiting details of all this. We're learning the top line of this agreement, but it's significant because just in about an hour or so ago, during the president's press conference, he criticized Democrats, contended that they weren't giving enough to for him in this deal. He didn't specify exactly what he was concerned about, but we learned moments after that, Nancy Pelosi was on the phone with the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. Later, just about an hour later, the president was in the Oval Office huddling with Mnuchin over the outlines of this deal. And now it appears they do, in fact, have a deal. We do expect the president to ultimately announce his support, and the speaker making clear here they're going to vote on this tonight. So, Wolf, this will pass the House probably by a big bipartisan vote. It's the second emergency measure to deal with the coronavirus outbreak here in the U.S. The question is, what will they do next? The question also is, what will the Senate do? The Senate is gone until next week. They scrapped their recess, but they will be back next week to provide the final votes, likely to give final passage on this measure, and then they'll have to deal with other issues that are outstanding as well as the economic fallout continues from this pandemic, Wolf.
Yeah, very significant development up on Capitol Hill, some bipartisan cooperation between the White House and Nancy Pelosi. Manu, I want you to stand by. We got the Maryland governor. Governor Hogan is still with us. So what's your reaction? It sounds, from your perspective, I'm sure, very positive.
Well, no, it sounds terrific, Wolf, and actually I'm getting the breaking news just as you're hearing it, but I think it's the fact that we're finding bipartisan agreement to move on this crisis is critically important. It's something I've been talking about for weeks. I've been talking about with my fellow colleagues, the other governors, and I've been talking about it to everyone who will listen. In a time of crisis like this, there can't be any Republicans or Democrats. We're all Americans, and we've all got to act with one voice and take the actions that are necessary. We're doing similar kinds of things that were just mentioned in this federal legislation. For example, on the lunches for these kids, we're providing 3 meals a day for all of these 800,000 kids that aren't going to be in schools. Some of the unemployment benefit stuff, we're taking those actions here in Maryland. But I think it's terrific that they've reached agreement in Congress, and it's very encouraging that I think everybody has finally reached the point where they understand the severity of this crisis, and that we're all coming together, both in the Congress, the administration, and the leaders of government at every single level at the federal, state, and local level. It's the way we've got to go after this. Everybody's in this together.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear that these kids, so many of these kids, they rely on a breakfast meal, a lunch meal at these schools. You're shutting down the schools in all of Maryland for 2 weeks. How are you going to distribute the food to these kids if they're not going to be in school?
So we have action plans in place just for this type of emergency, and our superintendent of schools has held multiple meetings and phone conference calls with all of the superintendents at the local level. We're talking about different ways to set it up, to distribute them in different places, but most of the school cafeterias will be providing lunches. People, for kids that want to come in to get the lunch or the breakfast or the dinner, or they're going to be able to come and pick up to-go things. And we're also engaging the folks throughout the school system and our local governments and potentially the National Guard to help in the delivery and service of food to the people that need to get it.
Yeah, it's so important because so many of these kids really need a good meal or two every single day, and are not necessarily getting it at home. All right, Governor Hogan, you want to make one final point?
No, I was just going to say that some of these actions that we're taking, that we took yesterday, that the president's taking today, they may sound kind of extreme, and they may seem scary to some folks, but these are actions that are absolutely necessary. We're all just trying to save lives and protect people, and we're all in this together. Well,
we're certainly grateful to you, Governor, for all you're doing. I know this is a tough situation, not only for you, but all the governors out there around the United States. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.